Good morning, everybody. How are you all doing today? Um, I'm glad to be back with you today, and we're going to have a second of a three-part lesson that we talked about a lot about last week. It was a little bit long, and I apologize for that, but I couldn't get around it by all my illustrations that I used. So I hope you had a chance not to fall asleep too much. But I'd like to continue on with that talk. So last week we talked about reaching out to our innermost self. And that's the movement from loneliness to solitude, or another way of putting it, from loneliness of desert to the garden of solitude, in which we truly find intimacy with God and with ourselves as well, knowing ourselves. So we're discussing this book that I share that means a whole lot to me, called Reaching Out by Henry Nouwen. And he describes that there are three movements in our spiritual journey in the living the life of Christ. Today we will discuss reaching out to our fellow human beings when we move from hostility to hospitality. And I'll talk about that in depth where it may be. Now, when I say hospitality, what am I talking about? Well, it's creating that true welcoming of others into our home or business, such as a hotel, for example. That's how we think about it. So I came across this really funny story I want to read to you real quickly that talks about hospitality. It's about a man named Paul who wrote a letter to a small hotel he planned to visit on the holidays. And this is what he said in the letter to the hotel: I would very much like to bring my dog with me. He is well groomed and very well behaved. Would you be willing to permit me to keep him in my room with me at night? Well, an immediate response came from the hotel owner, who wrote this to Paul: Dear Paul, I've been operating this hotel for many years. In all that time, I have never had a dog steal towels, bedclothes, silverware, or pictures off the wall. I never had to evict a dog in the middle of the night for being drunk and disorderly. And I've never had a dog run out on a hotel bill. Yes, indeed, your dog is welcome at my hotel. And if your dog will vouch for you, you're welcome to stay here too. I think that's pretty good. So there is even a college I found out that you can go to that trains students in the art of hospitality. If you go there to the website, this is what you'll read. Dusset, I believe that's how you pronounce it, Hospitality Management College is welcoming, engaged, and committed to excellence in the hospitality and culinary education for the benefit of our students and the hospitality industry. Located in the Philippines, we equip our future professionals with technical, interpersonal, and managerial competencies to prepare them for management and leadership roles in hospitality and culinary organizations. It's like a great kind of college I'd want to go to. Now, here's some tips for their students to treat how to treat others. And I wrote them down here and see what you think about them. It all starts at home, they said. Make sure your guests are comfortable. Invite people in your home often. Give gifts to show how you care. Extend your help and let them know you enjoy their company. Or basically, communicate how much you like having them in your home. Now, if you do all these things, they said that you'll be a great hospitable person. I wonder how we treat other people who come to visit us, and I know would come to visit me. I think I'd flunk the course in how I treat people sometimes. I take them for granted just a little bit. My mother shared a really funny story. When she was growing up, she was a very pretty young lady as a teenager. And these young men around the neighborhood would come to see her, as boys will. And her dad would always greet them at the doorway, at the front door, by saying this: Make yourself at home. If you don't, you ought to be, and just start laughing. Well, this totally embarrassed her, and she would just turn beet red when he would say that in front of the boy. And later on, she would chide him for it, and chew him out a little bit, and he would just laugh even more, saying, "Well, if he can't take it, he shouldn't be here." And I wouldn't say that's a great example of hospitality. Back in the days of our lives, as we think about it, when someone dropped by to see you, we would think that was a compliment. I mean, you would stop whatever you were doing and make coffee or iced tea or whatever it may be, grab some cookies or a cake and serve them and let them know they're welcome. And you would not cut off the time they would want to be there with you, and you would enjoy those times with them. But nowadays, there's such an immediate suspicion on why are they coming by? Why are they coming now? Is there something they want? And we get irritated that they would interrupt us and would have some kind of hostility a little bit under the cover, if you will, in regard to why they're there interrupting us and doing or planning what we want to do. And that openness has gone by the wayside. When someone comes by anymore, we would feel this, and we would sometimes act it out a little bit. So there's an equal type of characteristic, and that's the movement by which we take our hostilities and convert them into hospitality. It's a changing of relationships to our fellow human beings. And as you can see, I'm not talking about someone dropping by or making them feel comfortable as an occasional guest, but in a much more in depth, from the heart, spiritual, intimate way, a way that Christ has shown and taught us in his teachings that we miss the point sometimes of how he treated other people, not in just words, but in acceptance. So it is there that our innermost being can lead to reaching out to the many strangers who we meet on our journey in life. And when I'm talking about strangers, I'm not talking about someone you never met before necessarily, but a new way we see every human being, a new set of lenses that God gives us in a sense of how he accepts us and all of our deficiencies and all of our imperfections. He still accepts us and loves us and wants to be part of a community with him. Well, he wants to take that same attitude that Christ shown in his teachings and see every person as a stranger we've never even got to know very well and truly accepted them in a whole way. And it could be someone sitting right beside you in that classroom right now that you think you know, but if you truly look at them through Christ like eyes of hospitality, of bringing them home to you, to bring them into your innermost heart and accepting them for who they are, and cut away the hostility of the differences that you have between you. It could be someone that right where you're watching this video, possibly, that's where you live, and someone in your family that you don't know as well as you should, or maybe just a young grandchild that you haven't really truly got to know them from their perspective and who they are, and accepting them like Christ accepts you. So it is this world of estrangements from each other, that even from God, and there's a painful search for that hospitable place where life can be lived out without fear and rejection and doubts, and that community can be found truly among us. Within our Christian community, there's that possibility for men and women that can just cast off their strangers in the world identity and can find a hospitable space to where life can be lived out without fear and where community can be found and where they can be accepted and become our fellow human beings as imperfect as we are. And this movement is so hard and so full of difficulties because we're trying to override prejudice. We're trying to override biasness. We're trying to override memories of things that we hold and harbor back that we're not even conscious of sometimes from our background of how we're raised or experiences we've had of bad memories, and we've placed that upon someone else. It's that vulnerability of opening ourselves up to these other people around us, of a loving, caring way, accepting them for who they are as Christ accepts us. I've already said that, but it's so important for us to get to our head. It's an uphill climb, and it's continually us trying to be that Christ type way in our living of hospitality, of opening up our lives, our home of who we are to other people called strangers that we want to make into our friends, into our family, into our community. Within our Christian community, there is a possibility for people to do this. But in society, and yes, even our church, can seem increasingly full of the fearful and defensive and even aggressive people who cling to properties and things and even to position and look on suspicion of the world. And we can point them out and say, not our church. But yes, even among us, there is hostility between us. There's looking with suspicion upon one another who comes in that we don't know very well, have never met before, and they dress kind of odd, or they have long hair, or they don't look the same as us, have an accent that we know that they're not from Tennessee even, and immediately we have a suspicion about them, wondering who they are, versus an open, loving acceptance, because Christ has already accepted them. So who are we to judge? And that's a hard thing to do in our life, especially as older as we're getting. We get settled in these mindsets. And because of that, we have quick rejection and judgmentalism of other people because we've gone through so much in our life. It's easy to settle down into that hostility and think it's deserved and earned by our experiences. So it is where we respond from our personal spiritual solitude, back to our first lesson, of peace, love, and accepting of ourselves, that we can reach out and offer the same to the strangers around us. Now, did you get that passage there? We go from the solitude that we've gone from loneliness to solitude, and from that peaceful understanding about intimacy and conversation with God, and acceptance by God, and acceptance of ourselves, of knowing who we are, truly, in the eyes of God, we have a sense of peace, a sense of blessing, a sense of all of a sudden it's okay to risk kindness. It's okay to risk acceptance because we've been accepted. It's a spiritual humility that we're coming from. So now let's understand what the strangers mean in our life. Do we mean that we don't know them at all? No, I mean strangers in that we don't keep them from away from our love and acceptance and a spiritual union because they're different. It could be a non-Methodist, for example, or it could be another gender, or it could be these LGBTQ people out there that we're trying to figure out exactly how to work with them. But they're made in the image of God. And Christ died for them too. So back to the point, is it hostility or hospitality that we approach them? Because they are strangers to us. By the way they act, by the way they conduct themselves, by the way they look, by the way they sound, we find all kind of ways to create separation and hostility. So the image might be of soft kindness, like tea parties and a bland conversation about the weather and how the kids are, and a general atmosphere of coziness and let's be nice on a light surface way. No, it is the search for an authentic Christian spirituality. In the Old Testament and in the New Testament, this is serious business and a lifestyle. When Abraham, the father of all faiths, received three strangers at Mamre and offered them water, bread, and a tender calf to eat, they revealed themselves to him as the Lord, announcing that Sarah, his wife, would become pregnant and give birth to a son. You can read about this in Genesis chapter 18. And when the two travelers to Emmaus invited the stranger who had joined them on the road to stay with them for a night, he made himself known in the breaking of the bread as their Lord and Savior in Luke chapter 24. There are moments like this, examples of both Old and New Testament, in which God revealed himself through strangers when we opened ourselves up to hospitality. A great lesson as I grew up was from my mother, and a woman who seemed very strange came every Sunday to our church. My dad was pastor there. She was smiling, but a very quiet woman with her family. They didn't dress well, so their income wasn't very much. She oddly had on a winter coat no matter the season, no matter what. Others looked on her strange behavior and didn't really associate with her very easily and kind of kept away from her and just had a polite hello but moved on. Well, one Sunday, my mother, who always greeted her as a pastor's wife should greet people, asked her in a very kind way in conversation of why she always wore the coat, if she was okay medically or something else going on in her life. The woman with a smile explained that she had a medical condition and she was always cold and she always had to keep on something to keep her warm no matter what. My mother gave her a big hug and she said that she understood and she and her family were always welcome into our service. From hostility to hospitality, a movement of spiritual acceptance that happened before my very eyes. When my mother explained this at lunch that day, my eyes were open to that. To accept and not judge too quickly, as we wish someone would not judge us too quickly. Now, spiritual stories help us to realize it's not just that the hospitality is an important virtue, but even more than in context of hospitality, guest and host can reveal their most precious gifts and bring new life to each other. Now, what I mean by that, it is from the hospitality that we see God in a new way. It is from hospitality they feel God in a new way. It is from hospitality in unison we feel ourselves as truly children of a living God. Now, we often have ambivalence toward a stranger. We feel many forms of hostility, usually pervaded with fear and anxiety, preventing us from inviting people into our world. Our world is one of peace and justice and love are portrayed, but in reality, who cripple each other by mutual hostilities between ourselves. We say peace and love, but we live out the opposite. It's a free space where a stranger can enter and become a friend instead of an enemy into our lives. There's a great quote that I love. People will forget what you said, forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. That's a question to us. When people encounter us, how do they feel after encountering us? We're a nice person, we're polite, we have a nice smile, or do they see something radiating from inside of us outwardly that just pulls them into this Christ-like union with us because now we have turned it into hospitality of truly accepting them. So movement from hostility to hospitality is a movement that determines our relationship to other people. Parents and children. Children are not owned. Our most important guests are gifts to be cherished and cared for. Our children enter our home, ask for close attention and careful attention, stay for a while, and then leave to follow on their way. It's through that moment is an acceptance of them as a child and understanding to help them. Marriages and adult relationships, same thing applies. As a guest into our lives, given the freedom to move from friendship to a more intimate relationship while retaining their gifts and uniquenesses without changing. Or the church and its membership. The church is a family of a wide variety of people, but a common place where we come together in a free space to be who we really are and accepted as a fellow traveler seeking forgiveness and hope. So to convert, in closing, into from hostility into hospitality requires the creation of the friendly, empty space where we can reach out to our fellow human beings and invite them into a brand new relationship. This conversion is an inner event in our lives that cannot be manipulated but must be developed from within ourselves. You can't create a moment in time to meet someone. It's got to come from the inside out. Just as we cannot force a plant to grow, but we can take it, but take it can take away the weeds and the stones which prevent it from developing. We cannot force anyone to such a personal and intimate change of heart, but we can offer the space where such a change can take place. If everyone gave hospitality unconditionally, what would we look like in the world? How we look like to ourselves, individually and as a Sunday school class and as a church? So let me ask you some questions. What are some specific ways you might offer hospitality in your outreach where you are, where you live? How could our class, RIM, improve upon the ways it provides free and friendly space for the stranger, even though you know them by another name? It takes hands to build a house, but only hearts can build a home where strangers are accepted and given freedom, like us, to discover how to be a child of God. Hostility to hospitality is a journey, individually and as a Sunday school class. Examine your life as I examine mine. Do I have it? Do I accept it? Do I offer it out to others? The hospitality of God's grace. Well, hope you enjoyed that. We'll have our last lesson next Sunday on this topic. And so I give you warning. That way, if you want to skip class tomorrow, next Sunday rather, then there's your opportunity. If you say, okay, I don't want to hear more of this. But anyway, I hope you do listen in. God bless you. Have a wonderful week, and God be with you. Bye-bye.